Hello and welcome back. Now I promised I'd do a second video of the car racing, and so this is it, and then the next video after this one will be a farming video. Now this one, first of all, so it's going to be done the same way as the last video I did, where I've actually pre-raced some races and I've got the replays here that I'm going to play. So in this one I'm going to be racing a Ford Capri around Brno, which is a circuit in the Czech Republic. Now I used to race this car on this circuit on shift 2 all the time, so I know this track very, very well. As a result, we probably won't watch this whole race because I think from memory I get into position 1 in the second lap, so from then on it's probably a wee bit boring to watch. But the first lap's very, very interesting because one of the cars I'm racing against is a Chevy Monza. Now the Chevy Monza has a lot bigger engine than this one, than my car. My car has a 3 litre V6. The Chevy Monza of course has a 350 Chev V8. So the Chevy Monza, I just cannot keep up with it on the straights, but I can certainly outbreak it going into the corners. So our car's a little blue and white Ford Capri, that one there. That's our car. And while it's racing, I thought I'd tell you some stories. I want to cover some of the greatest motorsport cheating ever in the history of motorsport, just because some of it's quite interesting. So I'm going to do 2 from rallying, 3 from NASCAR, because I know I have a lot of American viewers, and then 1 from F1, Formula 1. Okay. So we'll start off with the 2 rally ones. So the first one I want to talk about is back in 1983, I think it was when they first started using 4-wheel drive rally cars, and Audi was the first manufacturer to use 4-wheel drive, the Audi Quattro. Now the thing with the Audi Quattros, when they were testing it out before the rallies and things, it seemed very, very slow, because it wasn't hanging the rear out like the old rear-wheel drive rally cars was, or anything like that. So to look at it, it seemed incredibly slow, but the stopwatches certainly told the story, which was that the 4-wheel drive on rally surfaces, not quite so much on some of the seal rallies perhaps, but on all of the ones that involved gravel or snow or ice or anything like that, certainly the 4-wheel drive had a huge advantage, even if it didn't look faster. So, 1980, it was either 82 or 83, I don't recall which day, but Lancia had the Lancia 037, which was the last 2-wheel drive rally car ever to win a World Rally Championship rally. And to do this involved actually quite a large amount of cheating. So Monte Carlo was the first rally of the season, and Lancia knew they didn't have the money to invest in a 4-wheel drive rally car at the stage. They had 4-wheel drive rally cars for the next season, but not for this season. And so they knew that they were at a huge disadvantage. And coming into Monte Carlo, which of course is tar seal, but it's tar seal with lots of snow and ice over it. So what the Lancia team did is the night before the rally, they went around the whole rally route in their van, the van that they carry all the parts in, pouring salt at the back of the van, salt on all the roads. Now of course anyone that lives in any winter area will know what salt does to snow and ice, and it basically melted it. So the morning of the rally, all the snow and ice was missing from the roads of Monte Carlo, and as a result the Lancia 037 managed to actually take a victory, even though this was after the 4-wheel drive rally cars had just started something and were dominating. But Lancia took that victory because they went out the night before in their van and salted all the roads. So that was one that I thought I'd share with you. And then probably the most famous cheat ever in rallying was this Toyota Celica Turbo. Now, when they were doing the turbocharged rally cars, they were all 4-wheel drive by the stage of course, but there was a rule that you only allowed you had to have a 34mm air restrictor for the turbochargers. So what that means is between the turbocharger and the engine, you had a plate or a hole drilled in it, and that hole was only allowed to be a maximum of 34mm. So that limited the amount of boost the turbo could get the amount of boost you get into the engine. So what Toyota did is they attached the air restrictor plate using spring washers. So though it had a 34mm hole, which was all they were allowed for the rules, there was actually gaps between this plate and the edge, a 4 to 5mm gap. So it actually meant they were getting a lot more air into the turbo than they were allowed, and it actually took quite a while for the stewards or anything to work out how Lancia had done that. So that was quite interesting. Then I might cover the first two NASCAR ones, then we'll stop this video and go on to the next video. So the first NASCAR one I want to talk about is Smokey Yunick. Okay, now in NASCAR there's always been rules as to the maximum amount of fuel you're allowed to carry in your fuel tank, and so this of course means to a large degree that determines how many pit stops you've got to have in your race. Okay? However, there was no rules around the fuel line running from the fuel tank to the engine. So what Smokey Yunick did is he had a fuel line that didn't run straight from the fuel tank to the engine, as it would in most cars, but it ran a very convoluted, twisted route. So his fuel line was actually 11 feet long, running from the fuel tank to the engine. Not only that, but it also had a 2-inch diameter, which is much, much bigger than what you normally have in a fuel line. It meant that he could actually carry 2 gallons of petrol just in the fuel line alone. Now the interesting thing is, at the end of the race, and he did win the race, but the car got scrutineered at the end of the race because they thought there might have been some sort of cheating going on, because he had one less fuel stop than all the other teams, and so it seemed that like perhaps he had too much fuel in the car or anything. So they took the fuel tank out of the car, and how they tested is they filled up with water sort of thing, and they measure how much water they had to put in it to fill it up. And sure enough, the fuel tank was exactly the size it should have been. And the reason he got caught was he got so sick of waiting, he went and jumped in his car and drove off in it. But he drove off in it before they took the fuel tank back in. So he jumped in his car and drove off, and it had no fuel tank, and it still went just fine. And that was because it still had a couple of gallons of fuel in the fuel line still. Okay, so that's how he got caught. And then the second rally one I want to talk about was Richard Petty, who of course is a very, very NASCAR, sorry. Was a very, very famous NASCAR driver, and what he did at one stage is they put wax on the cylinders of the car, because you only allowed a maximum of a 5.8 cubic inch engine. So putting the wax on the top of the cylinders, when they measured the capacity of the engine, because the cylinders were therefore bigger than they should have been, they took up more space, therefore it was limited to 5.8 cubic inches, which is the maximum allowed. But once the engine got hot, the wax melted, and it became a 6.2 cubic inch engine. So of course it gave him quite a lot more power than a 5.8. But yeah, he got caught doing that, so he lost the points he would have won for that race. Now, I think we'll call that race up. We'll go on to the next replay, and I'll tell you about the third NASCAR cheat I want to tell you about, and also the F1 cheat. Now, the next race I'm going to show you is actually going to not be a race at all, but it's going to be a hill climb. Just because I just want to show you something else that you can do in this game apart from just racing. You can also do hill climbs. Now here we're going to do a hill climb in Germany. This track is mostly hairpins and things, as most hill climbs are, but we're going to be racing a Porsche 911 RSR. This car is a real handful to drive. It's rear engine, and so it's very, very tail happy, and as a result it's a real handful to drive. And I was actually quite impressed with the drive I did for most of this hill climb here. okay. The third cheat I wanted to tell you about, the third motorsport cheat, was Ken Schroeder, also a NASCAR driver. Now, he had he came up with a very, very ingenious cheat, which technically, although very, very underhand, wasn't actually technically cheating. So he was allowed to keep his win, and he didn't lose his points for that race. However, after that race, because of what he did, there was some new rules added to prevent anyone from ever doing it again. So what happened is he was winning his race, but there had been some sort of problem. It might have been his tyres were wearing out. So the car that was in second place was catching up fast, and he could tell, he could see the light on the wall that he wasn't going to be able to hold the win till the end of the race. So what he did is he reached over and let the fire extinguisher off in the car. And the fire extinguisher started, blowing what appeared to be smoke, just blowing all this steamy smoke stuff out the side of the car. So the car that was in second place, seeing that Ken Schroeder's car was obviously in trouble because it was, had smoke pouring out of it, it slowed down a wee bit, so he didn't have to push so hard because he knew that he had the win guaranteed. But of course there wasn't any problem with the car engine at all, it was just a fire extinguisher. So Ken Schroeder didn't slow down at all, but the amount of time it took for the second place driver to realise that Ken Schroeder's car wasn't slowing down, and that there wasn't anything in fact wrong with it, even though it was blowing smoke out of it, was enough that it meant that Ken Schroeder was able to hold on to that win and win the race. As I said, he did get to attain the points, because technically at the time there was nothing in the rule book about only being able to use your fire extinguisher in the case of a fire. But the rules were changed after that race as a result of him doing that. And then the Formula 1 cheat I wanted to mention, which is a very, very well known one, was the team was Renault, and the driver was Fernando Alonso, and the second driver, the driver that drove the second Renault, was Nelson Piquet Jr. Now, what happened is, after Fernando Alonso did his pit stop, so he was now out sort of almost a lap behind everybody else, because he had just done his pit stop. The team got his second driver, the driver of the second car, Nelson Piquet Jr., to deliberately crash his car, and so the yellow flags had come out, and as a result, Fernando Alonso was basically able to, because under a yellow flag, you can catch up to the car in front of you, but you can't overtake anyone. But it meant he was able to basically do a whole lap under yellow, gain a whole lap on everyone else, because he was able to catch up to the car in front. It was almost a whole lap ahead of him. So that was the other treat I wanted to tell you about, and we will call that it for this motor racing video. Now, as I said, the next video I'm going to do is a farming video, because I want to show you all another farm. Okay, so I'll catch you all later. Thanks. Bye.